There's a quiet change coming to towns all over this country, and most people barely seem to notice it. Over the next several years, a lot of small business owners are going to step away. Some will retire on their own terms. Some will hang on longer than they probably should. Some will get pushed out by health problems or family strain, burnout, or death. However it happens, a handoff is coming, whether people are ready for it or not. And that matters more than I think most people realize. You know, I spent 30 years in the Navy, and one thing you learn pretty quickly is that handoffs matter. You train your relief. You pass along what needs to be passed along. You do not wait until the last second and hope the mission is magically going to keep running after you disappear. That's not leadership. That is just delay, dressed up as confidence. And I think we are doing some of that right now in our communities. A lot of people hear a number like $14 trillion and think that this is mainly about money. Well, it's about money, yes, but not only money. It's also about whether businesses that took decades to build will still be standing when the people who built them are gone. And that's the part that stays with me. When a local business closes, it's not always dramatic. Sometimes there's no big speech. There's no public mourning, just a sign that comes down, an empty lot, a building with paper over the windows, and a few people in town saying, well, I guess that's that. But what disappears is usually bigger than the building. The job disappears. A place people trusted disappears. Sometimes a little piece of the town's memory goes with it. And once enough of those places are gone, people start saying that the town just doesn't feel like itself anymore. That does not happen all at once. That happens one handoff at a time. Fox Business ran a piece recently on what some people are calling the silver tsunami. The basic point was simple. Nearly half of America's small business owners are now 55 or older, and only a little over half have a succession plan in place. That is a lot of businesses nearing transition with no clear successor. And that should get people's attention, because small business is a big part of American life. According to figures cited in that article, small businesses employ more than 62 million Americans and account for roughly 43% of the U.S. GDP. So this is not a small thing. If a large number of those businesses close instead of changing hands, well, communities feel it. Workers feel it. Customers feel it. Local economies feel it. And I think there is a personal side to this that gets missed. Because for a lot of owners, the business is not just an income stream. This is their life's work. Their name is tied to it. Their reputation is tied to it. Their relationships are tied to it. They know the customers. They know the vendors. They know the little things that keep the place running. In a lot of cases, the business works because they're still there holding it together. That may sound impressive, but it's also a problem. Because if everything depends on one person, then what you have built may be successful, but it's not durable. And I can understand how that happens. I really do. You build something piece by piece. You solve the next problem. You keep payroll moving. You answer the calls that nobody else can answer. You become the person who knows how everything works because for years that's what the business needed. And then one day it hits you that the whole thing may depend on you more than it should. And that is not a comfortable realization, but it's a necessary one. I think one of the hardest things for business builders to accept is this: being indispensable is not the same as building something that lasts. In fact, sometimes it's quite the opposite. If you are the owner, at some point the question changes. It stops being, can I keep this going, and becomes, can this keep going without me? And that's a more honest question. Maybe a painful one too, but that's where legacy starts getting real. And that is one reason that Fox article caught my attention. It did not just describe the problem. It also pointed to one company trying to help. The company is called American Operator, and the article described it as a firm working to bridge that succession gap by pairing retiring owners with people ready to take the reins. In one example, a painting company in Jackson, Wyoming transitioned leadership to a younger operator who started with minority ownership and had a path toward majority ownership over time. A few days later, the New York Post went into the same company in more detail. And their description was interesting. The model is not just sell and walk away. It helps retiring owners transition the business to a younger operator, often someone with relevant experience. The seller gets liquidity, but may still stay involved in an advisory role instead of simply vanishing. Now, I'm not telling you one company has solved the whole thing. They have not. This problem is far too big for that. But I am saying this: that kind of example helps people see the issue more clearly. Because a lot of these businesses do not need to die. They need a handoff. They need someone who can come in and learn the operation, carry the relationships, understand what made the business trustworthy in the first place, keep what needs to be kept, improve what needs to be improved, and do it without gutting what made the business valuable in the first place. That's where the deeper question comes in. What are we trying to preserve? If the answer is just money, then almost any sale looks good enough on paper. But if the answer includes trust and jobs, local service, and the life of a town, then suddenly the quality of the handoff matters a great deal. And I think that is where stewardship comes into play. We are used to admiring the founder, the builder, the one person who started with nothing and turned it into something. Fair enough. That is admirable. But building is only part of the story. Finishing well is another part. And finishing well means you have thought about what happens after you. That is not weakness. That is maturity. It is also humility, because it means accepting that the thing you built was never meant to become a monument to your own importance. It was meant to serve people. And if it served people well, then there ought to be some concern for whether it can keep serving people when you are gone. That applies to businesses. It applies to families. It applies to churches. It applies to communities. It may even apply to more of life than we would like to admit. You do not really finish well by making yourself impossible to replace. You finish well by making sure that the work can continue with integrity after you step aside. That is a different kind of success. Now, the other side of this is there's also a challenge to the younger people in our communities. Not everybody needs to launch the next flashy thing from scratch. Some people may be far better off stepping into something steady, useful, and local, and already needed. And that will not sound glamorous to everybody. It won't make a very exciting podcast intro, but there is real dignity in taking over a good business and carrying it forward well. There is responsibility in that. A lot of people may be overlooking that opportunity because we tend to think ambition always means starting something new. But not all good work is invention. Sometimes good work is inheritance handled well. Sometimes it is receiving something valuable and refusing to let it collapse in your hands. That's not lesser work. That may actually be the harder work, because now you are responsible not only for growth, but for continuity, for people who already count on the business, and for employees who have mortgages and kids and routines, for customers who have trusted that place forever. And for a community that may never thank you, but will absolutely notice when something steady disappears. I think that's real leadership. And I think communities themselves need to wake up a little too. We talk a lot about supporting local businesses in sentimental terms. Go buy a coffee here. Shop there. Nothing wrong with that. But if we really care about local businesses, then we ought to care about whether they survive the owner's exit. Not just whether we said the right things during Small Business Week. Because that is where the real test comes. What happens when the owner's tired? What happens when the kids do not want it? What happens when there is no successor in the family? What happens when the business is solid, but the next chapter is completely unclear? That is where sentiment runs out and structure matters. That is why I keep coming back to the handoff. In the Navy, the watch matters, not because one person is special, but because the duty continues. Somebody has to be ready when the next shift starts. Somebody has to know what's going on. Somebody has to carry the responsibility without dropping it. That is what we are really talking about here. This is not just a transfer of wealth. It's a transfer of responsibility, of knowledge, of trust, of habits, of relationships, of local memory. And if we handle it badly, we will not just lose businesses. We will lose stability in places that are already stretched thin. And that is why I think this subject deserves more attention than it gets. To those who have built something, train your relief. Start earlier than you think you need to. Do not confuse control with stewardship. Do not wait until the emergency makes the decision for you. And to those who are younger and looking for meaningful work, look more closely at what's already standing in front of you. There may be opportunities right in your own town that are less flashy than a startup, but way more valuable than people realize. Not everything worth doing is new. Some things are worth preserving, and maybe that is the heart of it. A lot of towns in this country are about to find out whether the handoff is being taken seriously, whether the watch is being passed well, whether wisdom and responsibility are being passed along at all. I hope it is, because some decline is unavoidable, but neglect is not. And when the time comes to step away, the real question is not whether something was built. The real question is whether anybody is ready to carry it forward. That is the handoff. That is the watch. And that is what is at stake. If this made you think about a business, a family or a town that's facing this kind of a handoff, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your perspective. And if this kind of conversation is helpful to you, subscribe and come along. Let's look for the extraordinary in the ordinary together. I'll see you on the next watch.